Time now for my review of Andor Season 2. By the way, I did do a review of Season 1 a couple years ago, and I absolutely loved the first season of Andor. This is probably some of the best, or the best, Star Wars Disney content that we've gotten, along with Rogue One, which is fitting because Andor Season 1 and 2 do tie in to Rogue One, which ties into the original trilogy. So we're going to start with, I guess, my overall opinion about Season 2, and then we might talk some spoilers at the end. And by the way, I'm not going to talk about the controversy that happened in the first few episodes of Andor Season 2. I did a separate video about that if you want my opinion regarding the so-called controversy. But I'm curious about your thoughts, views, and opinions when it comes to Season 1, Season 2 of Andor, as well as Rogue One, because I do feel like they all connect together rather nicely. So obviously, I think very highly of the second season. It's not as good as the first season, but it's good enough to serve as a segue between Season 1 of Andor as well as Rogue One. So that's pretty much how I feel about it. And like I mentioned a few times, Andor, in my opinion, is basically Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad of the Star Wars universe. And I'm glad that Tony Gilroy and his entire team and all the actors and writers and everybody involved in Andor got the opportunity to give us 2 seasons of this phenomenal show. And I'm glad that it's not overstaying its welcome. It stuck around for 2 seasons. It moves on to Rogue One, and then that's the end of this story, which once again leads us into the original trilogy. If you enjoyed Season 1 of Andor, I think you will like Season 2. Granted, the first few episodes are rather slow. It takes a minute for it to get its footing because there's a lot of pieces on the table, and there's also time jumps leading all the way up to almost the events of Rogue One, and of course, Episode 4, A New Hope. But it all makes sense at the end of the day. But yeah, you have to get past those first few episodes of Season 2 until it really starts to get good. So overall, I think that Season 2 was great. It isn't as good as Season 1, but it was worth watching, especially getting to the middle and, of course, the finale, the final 3 episodes that just aired on Disney+. Definitely enjoyed watching Andor, and I feel like that Season 2 was absolutely worth the wait, in my opinion, especially if you've been waiting for the past couple years to see how it all plays out for these characters. And yeah, a lot of them don't exactly get happy endings, and we'll talk about that now in the spoiler section, along with everything except for the controversy. I don't feel like going over that again. If you want to hear about my opinion, once again, I'll link the video below in the description section. It's also in the Star Wars playlist, along with my review of Season 1 of Andor, some of the Disney shows I've watched, as well as all the movies that make up the saga, right? The prequels, the original trilogy, and of course the sequels, if you want my review and opinions about those. With all that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk spoilers. I probably won't cover everything. I'm going to try and go chronologically. If I jump ahead here or there, my bad. I'm trying to keep this in chronological order, but sometimes that's easier said than done, especially with what's going on upstairs, right? And by the way, I want your thoughts, views, and opinions regarding Season 2 of Andor as well. Did you feel satisfied watching it start to finish? Do you think that it's a good bridge between Season 1 of Andor and Rogue One? Your thoughts, views, and opinions, welcome below in the comments section. So yeah, the first 3 episodes weren't the best, but they were setting a lot of things up. And like I already said, if you want my take about the controversy, I got it linked below in the description section and in the Star Wars playlist, FYI. So we got the farm planet where Cassian, Bix, and some of the others are at, including B2. And whenever I think of B2, I just get sad for some reason. He's such a sad droid. He's just the droid you want to take home, right? And take care of and make sure he's fully charged all the time. So they're on the farm planet. And then there's a secret meeting happening with some high-ranking Imperials from the ISB, like Patrigas, along with Deidre, and, of course, Director Krennic's there. And, of course, it's on the behalf of the Emperor. The target is a planet called Gorman, which is a pretty wealthy planet. They have spiders that do these webs that I guess, design things like clothing, fabrics. I don't know. They're a pretty important planet, right? But there's something in the planet itself that the Empire needs for the Death Star. Now, Krennic doesn't tell Deidre and, well, Patronex already knows about the Death Star. We find out about that at the end. But Deidre doesn't know why the Empire is so interested in Gorman, except for the fact that, there's something that the planet has that the Empire needs for the Emperor's energy project. That's basically the cover story. It's for the Emperor's energy project, but that's obviously a lie. So there's this really cool year-long occupation of Gorman that takes place, but it's all getting set up in the first 3 episodes. So Gorman goes from being like a wealthy planet in the Mid-Rim to occupied by the Empire. The Empire's continuing to take away their rights. They erect this huge building in the middle of Gorman, and apparently there's like a memorial in the middle in the plaza from like a whole bunch of Gormans previously that were murdered by Tarkin because Tarkin wanted to land on Gorman in a specific spot, but these protesters like years ago refused, and so he's like, nah, I'm just gonna land on them, fuck them. And so quite a few Gormans were killed by Tarkin, well, his ship, I guess. So yeah, the Gormans kind of have like already a chip on their shoulder about that incident, but things start to get worse with the people of Gorman. Meanwhile, Mon Mothma back on their home world, her husband, her daughter's getting married, so there's all that. And her friend, he starts having some issues, some debt problems, and Luthen decides that something has to be done about Mon Mothma's friend. So Cinta takes Mon Mothma's friend on a little flight, never to be seen again. And the daughter gets married to a mob boss's son. That's the last we see of the daughter, so hopefully things worked out with the daughter and the son. And we'll find out what happens to the husband at the end. And I feel like they could have done something different with the husband's faith, but I don't want to go there yet. So the mission that Andor goes on at the beginning is he sneaks into like a research base to steal a TIE Advanced. Now, the TIE Advanced is the same starfighter that Darth Vader uses in A New Hope. Now, it's not the exact same TIE Advanced. It's just a prototype. For the most part, Andor manages to steal the TIE Advanced. He gets it off the planet. But then something happens. He lands on this planet called Yavin. You may have heard of it. He runs into some insurgents. The insurgents break up into like 2 halves. They end up fighting each other. There's some monsters. And Cassian gets away. It's kind of a nothing burger. But anyways, Cassian finds out that Imperials are doing audits on the farm planet that Bix and a few friends are, including B2. And I think one of Cassian's friends that was in season 1, he gets killed by a stormtrooper. The stormtroopers can actually, shoot and hit things in Andor, makes them even more menacing. He manages to rescue Bix. The controversy, once again, I'm not talking about it here. Already discussed it. So Bix, Cassian, and another character get away. Poor B2 gets left behind, but it's okay. He gets a happy ending. We'll get there in a minute. But yeah, it was nice to see B2 again. And we will get a little bit of time with K2, like K2SO from Rogue One. He comes back. We'll find his origin story, unfortunately, on Gorman. So the next big thing that happens is the occupation of Gorman and eventually the Gorman massacre, because there's obviously a resistance movement, and Cyril's actually sent in by Deidre to help with the resistance movement, or keep tabs on the resistance movement. But obviously Cyril has no idea the Empire's true intentions because of compartmentalization. He has no idea what he's really doing or why he's doing it. He's just a Empire fanboy, and he's, I guess, in a relationship with Deidre at this point. They get some time with Cyril's mom back on Coruscant. It's kind of an interesting conversation between the 3 of them. There are things that Cyril doesn't know about, there are things that Deidre knows about, and there's things that only Krennic and Partagaz, Tarkin, and the Emperor know about. So that's just the way it is in the Empire. What a surprise. But throughout the entire year on Gorman, there is propaganda, there is negativity being promoted by the news outlets of the Empire. What a surprise. It just feels like the Empire, I don't know, is turning people against Gorman throughout the galaxy, even though the people of Gorman obviously have their rights and grievances. to what's being done. And there's protesting, there's resistance movements, there's bombings happening, and it all leads to a massive slaughter in the plaza, the same plaza that Tarkin's ship landed a few years ago, which ended up squashing a few Gorman citizens. There is a false flag operation where a sniper shoots one of the Imperial officers or soldiers, and then all hell breaks loose. Imperials start shooting Gormans, Gormans start shooting Imperials, and Andor happens to be there at the time. Andor barely escapes. Cyril comes to realize that the Empire are not exactly the good guys. He confronts Deidre, and Deidre's like, hey, you just stay here, stay with me. We have good things waiting for us back on Coruscant. But Cyril's had enough. He's become disillusioned by the Empire at this point. So he's basically out in the plaza watching the slaughter take place. But unfortunately, Cyril happens to see Andor across the plaza. And if you remember from season 1, Andor became his white whale. And Cyril here is Captain Ahab. Everything in Cyril's mind at this moment gets pushed to the side for revenge, because he makes a beeline across the plaza straight for Andor. They get in a fight in a bar, and Cyril almost kills Andor, but he has his gun raised up to Andor, and Andor looks at him like puzzled, and he's like, who are you? And in that moment, Cyril realizes that this person that's been a bane in Cyril's existence since he was a security guard in the first few episodes of season 1, the guy that, nearly killed him, has no idea who he is. But it's this moment of pause that seals Cyril's fate, because he gets shot in the head by one of the resistance leaders, who was a well-to-do businessman, shop owner, now, fighting in the resistance against the Empire. So a lot of bad things have happened on Gorman. And, this doesn't sit too well with the rebellion, because Andor goes back to Yavin to report on it, and he's thinking about leaving the rebellion. It's pretty brutal, and it's probably like I hate to say this, but it was probably the best part of season 2. Everything that led to the Gorman massacre, the propaganda by the media in the Empire. I mean, it happens in real life, unfortunately. There were a lot of tyrannical regimes. It happened in Nazi Germany. It happened in the Soviet Union. It happened, you get the idea, right? But I really do appreciate how serious Tony Gilroy and his team took the Empire. Because a lot of times, like in Rebels, for example, even though I do like Rebels, there are times when the Empire comes across as kind of a joke, with a few exceptions. But the Empire was not a joke. They spent, 2 decades under Emperor Palpatine terrorizing the galaxy, continuing to take more and more liberties and freedoms away, while the Imperial Senate was basically reduced to nothing and a bunch of talking heads, with a few exceptions like Mon Mothma and, of course, Bail Organa and a few others. Meanwhile, in Coruscant, a lot of the members of the Imperial Senate, which are the majority, are a bunch of Emperor cheerleaders, right? Most of them are just saying, hey, the Empire had no choice to do what they did. They were justified. We're going to mourn the deaths of the Imperials, and the Gormans are a bunch of traitors to the Empire. Meanwhile, you have other senators like Mon Mothma and Bail Organa. By the way, Bail Organa was played by Benjamin Bratt in season 2 of Andor, because Jimmy Smits, who played Bail Organa in episode 3, as well as Obi-Wan, he unfortunately couldn't come back to be Bail Organa because of scheduling difficulties. It seems kind of fitting that Benjamin Bratt replaced Jimmy Smits as Bail Organa in season 2 of Andor, because I remember them both from the 90s as detectives on TV shows. Benjamin Bratt was on Law and Order, and Jimmy Smits was on NYPD Blue. So, in the words of George Lucas, I guess it rhymes, right? But Bail Organa was performed brilliantly by Benjamin Bratt, but at the same time, you still have to remind yourself that it is still Bail Organa, but it's being played by a different actor. So it's hard to do that whenever we're used to Jimmy Smits as Bail Organa, but at the end of the day, it's not a deal breaker. Mon Mothma has decided that she's finally had enough of the secrecy. She needs to speak out. She meets with Luthen. Luthen arranges to get her off the planet, and he calls Cassian. Cassian manages to come back to Coruscant in order to rescue Mon Mothma. Mon Mothma is able to give a rousing speech against the Emperor before her message is cut off, and then she manages to get away. Now, a lot of stuff happens in the scene leading up to her escape with Cassian, thanks to the help from Clea and a few others. But to be honest, I think that's pretty much enough for that story. So Mon Mothma manages to escape. What a shock. What a surprise. I know. Spoilers. She gets to Yavin. There is obviously time jumps. Like, there's a time jump between season 1, season 2. 3 episodes, time jump. 3 episodes, time jump. You get the idea. All the way to BBY Year 1, which is where the last 3 episodes take place. So Mon Mothma's escaped from the Coruscant, and over the year of her escape, so did Bail Organa. He got away. So he and her are both hiding on Yavin, leading the rebellion that Cassian has helped build. He's a captain at this point in the rebellion. But at the same time, he has a habit with K2 and others just going off and doing their own thing, kind of pissing off General Draven and, of course, the council of the rebellion. So they don't like that too much. And yeah, K2's origin story, he's one of the droids that is sent out on the streets of Gorman, massacring people along with the Imperials. But that droid gets damaged, and then Cassian manages to get the parts put on his vehicle that he escapes in. And so he gets repaired and repurposed for the rebellion. So that's K2's origin story. And K2, even though he was in only the last 3 episodes, last 2 episodes, he got a lot of time. He got a lot of time, and I did enjoy our time with K2. So yeah, one of my favorite droids in Disney Star Wars, also B2, because I just like B2. I don't know why, I just do. Just such a sad droid, but he does get a happy ending. We're getting there. So next, we got some time with Krennic and some scenes at the art gallery. No, not an art gallery. It was at a party. There was a party, and a lot of the bigwigs were there. Krennic was there. I think, Luthen was there. Mon Mothma was there. A few others were there as well. So that was an okay episode. Oh, yeah, Lonnie was also there. And, I feel so bad for Lonnie because, he was helping the rebellion. He was helping Luthen. He was an agent, like a double agent within the ISB. And in the last 3 episodes, this is leading up to the events of Rogue One and the original trilogy. Luthen had been hacking Deidre's, files, and Deidre didn't know about it. And Lonnie discovered some information regarding a secret weapon that the Emperor is building. The entire energy plan is a lie. So the materials on Gorman, the Kyber crystals on Jeddah, all of it ties into the secret weapon, which of course is the Death Star. So he meets with Luthen. He tells Luthen about all this. He wants to get, himself and his wife and child off the planet. His wife and child are in hiding right now. Unfortunately for Lonnie, Luthen decides to tie a loose end, and poor Lonnie ends up being killed by Luthen. I do feel really bad for Lonnie, but I hope that at least his wife and child managed to get off the planet, so maybe they were able to escape. We don't really find out what happens to them, but I'm going to assume that they got away. But, poor Lonnie got shot for his information. And I guess it just ties into the first time we're introduced to Cassian in Rogue One. He basically kills a spy that was feeding the rebellion information, but it was just too dangerous to keep him alive, so Cassian decided to kill him. So that's where Cassian gets it from Luthen. So the Empire under Deidre is now after Luthen, right? So Deidre is basically got Luthen in the crosshairs. Luthen passes what information he got from Lonnie to Clea and tells Clea to move, to get the hell out of there, right? And, Luthen goes back to the art gallery to destroy the communications device. Deidre shows up, and they have this back and forth for a moment, where she's acting like she's coming to the art gallery to show off a piece in a box, and Luthen's playing along, the friendly art gallery guy. Meanwhile, they both know that they're each wearing a mask at this point. And then whenever Deidre pulls out this Imperial box, right? And I think it goes back to season 1, this transmitter. Yeah, Luthen knows that the mask has come off. So he's like, yeah, okay, fine. This little game of ours is over. And then she's like, I've been after you all this time. And then Luthen's like, yeah, I've been aware of you this whole time. So they have this back and forth. And what she doesn't realize is that Luthen's already one step ahead of her because she sees in the background of the art gallery in the room that there's smoke coming out of the room, and she realizes, oh fuck, Luthen, just must have just destroyed something very important to me and the ISB. But while she's distracted, Luthen has this dagger that he was showing her earlier, this ancient dagger, and basically uses the dagger to basically game end himself. But he doesn't kill himself because he gets taken to the hospital and he's being kept alive on a machine. And so Clea decides she has to sneak into the hospital in order to kill Luthen so that, he doesn't end up getting interrogated and tortured by the Empire. It's what Luthen would have wanted. So she sneaks into the hospital. She kills a few Imperials, causes a distraction, and she's able to basically, I guess, pull the cord, right, on Luthen. And there's a good backstory, the origin story between Luthen and Clea. And I guess Clea was a survivor of a group of people that were being killed. I don't know if Luthen was working for the Empire because the uniforms that they're wearing don't look Imperial, but maybe he was, and he was like a sergeant in the Empire at the time. And he took sympathy on Clea, and basically Clea became his daughter. And so there's a few time jumps of them together, and her hatred for the Empire and his hatred for the Empire and their desire to bring down the Empire. There's some good scenes between younger Clea and Luthen. Once again, I guess fortifying that father-daughter relationship between the two. Clea does some Morse code stuff to Yavin, to Cassian and the others. And they manage to get back to Coruscant and rescue Clea, even though a few Imperials get killed in the process. Oh, Deidre also gets arrested because of her failures. So she gets arrested. She gets interrogated by Krennic. And things don't end too well for Deidre. She ends up going to prison, and she's in the same outfit that the poor Andy Serkis was in and Andor was in. I don't even know if she's at the same prison that they were at. But that was a good arc in season 1. But yeah, Deidre ends up losing her position in the ISB, and she becomes a prisoner. Now, what's interesting is I wouldn't be surprised if the rebellion manages to eventually come across the prison, rescue the prisoners, and actually unintentionally rescue Deidre, who now obviously probably doesn't really like the Empire anymore because she gave almost everything in service to the Empire, but at the end of the day, it wasn't good enough. Deidre ends up going to prison. And Patrigas ends up game-ending himself as well. He basically takes a blaster to his head. We don't see him actually do it, but it's implied he did it because he was screwed as well because of everything that was going down. But I did like their characters. And I liked how much time they spent with the ISB and how threatening the ISB was, how they were keeping tabs on the entire galaxy and trying to hunt down Axis and trying to keep the lid on what was going on Gorman and everything that they were up to, all the nasty stuff on behalf of the Emperor. So all that was really good. So Patrigas was a great major of the ISB. Deidre and the others were good Imperial officers. But at the end of the day, being a good Imperial officer, it usually ends up leading to your death or imprisonment by the Empire or the rebellion. So yeah, it doesn't end well for you. A few other characters, Faye, Mon's cousin. She's involved in the rebellion, obviously. She has a love interest with Cinta. And Cinta, unfortunately, a year prior to the Gorman massacre, while she's helping the resistance, Cinta accidentally gets killed, and it pisses off Faye, understandably so, because they were lovers. Saul Guerrero gets some time, and we get to see him becoming even more insane throughout the events of Andor Season 2, leading up to Rogue One. So we got some time with Saul Guerrero. Now, I hope that Mon Mothma's daughter had a happy ending, at least as happy as you can expect, married to the son of a powerful crime boss. But I really feel like things should have been a little different for Mon Mothma's husband, because he stayed on Coruscant when she fled. So you think that the Empire would want reprisals, revenge? You think they'd want to take out anyone that was connected to Mon Mothma, whether they were aware of her intentions to speak out against the Emperor and flee to the rebellion. But there's a scene at the end in, like, I guess one of their cars, like flying over Coruscant, where her husband's with a mistress having a drink. And I feel like that fate's too good for her husband. Now, look, I don't dislike her husband, but think about it. This happens in all sorts of authoritarian regimes. If one person says anything negative about the regime, usually it's not just that one person that gets punished. If they escape, they usually take it out on their closest, kin and family and relatives, etc. My question is, why is Mon Mothma's husband still allowed to live a life of luxury and not sitting in a prison? Why isn't he sitting in a cell across from Deidre? That's where he should have been at the end of season 2, implying that, yeah, the Empire doesn't like the fact that your wife rebelled against us and betrayed us and the Emperor. So, yeah, I think that his fate should have been a little different, but that's just a small complaint on my part. It does set things up for Rogue One. And Bix, she ends up leaving Cassian because Cassian, after the Gorman Massacre, he wants to leave the rebellion, but Bix doesn't want to. And she feels like the only way to keep Cassian in the rebellion is by getting reassigned somewhere else within the galaxy on behalf of the rebellion. And so she tells Cassian that, look, when this is all over, we'll get back together. But unfortunately, if you watch Rogue One, that does not happen. However, at the very end of season 2, Bix is on the farm planet with B2. So B2 gets a happy ending. So I'm glad B2 gets a happy ending. I think he even has another little droid with him. So that's cool. And Bix is walking in the field. She has a baby, of course. You know what that means. When she left Cassian, she was pregnant. So there's a little Andor that survived. So part of Cassian lives on through Bix and Bix's and Cassian's child. And B2. I kind of wish that Luthen would have had a more epic finale where he would have gone down in his badass spaceship against the Empire. Maybe like doing a kamikaze run against a Star Destroyer. That would have been way cooler. And speaking of his ship, I was expecting one of the Imperial techs to fuck up and cause the ship to blow up and destroy the art gallery and all the Imperials that were inside the art gallery. That was a missed opportunity. I feel like Luthen would have had that ship of his rigged with all sorts of booby traps, anticipating that if the Empire ever got their hands on that ship, that they wouldn't be very long for this world. So 2 missed opportunities there. One is Mon Mothma's husband's fate. I feel like it was too kind. I'm not saying he's a bad guy, but the Empire, the Emperor, you think they would have done something about him because of his wife, right? Even if they are estranged. And the other is Luthen's ship. I think it would have been badass if it would just blown up and took out a whole bunch of Imperials, including the art gallery. There was something clever that happened in the trailer, and I only watched one of the trailers. There's a scene where Deidre's looks like she's choking, and a lot of people thought that it was Vader choking her, but it's actually her being torn up about the death of Cyril with the aftermath of the Gorman Massacre. So that's why she's having trouble breathing, because she's in this safe room crying and stuff, trying not to show the other Imperials how emotional she's getting. But that was very clever. Very clever, Disney and Lucasfilm, with that trailer to make us think that she was getting, force choked by Vader. Credit to all the actors. All the actors were great. The writing was phenomenal. The directing was really good. It was a slow start with the first few episodes of season 2, but it definitely built up, and it paved the way for the events of Rogue One and, of course, episode 4, A New Hope. If there's one thing I really wish we would have gotten in season 2 of Andor, was sometime with the Emperor, right? With Ian McDiarmid coming back as the Emperor, chilling in the Imperial Palace, which was once the Jedi Temple. Because we hear him reference to, people talk about, critics oh, I'm meeting with him. Patrick says, I'm meeting with him. We all have meetings with Palpatine or the Emperor. He's looming, right, above everything. But we don't get to see Palpatine. What I'm saying is I would have liked a day in the life episode focused on Emperor Palpatine, where you see some scenes out of Rebels, right, where like they have this like version of Palpatine where he's, you know, still looks normal, but he's wearing a nice outfit, you know, on the telescreens across the galaxy, where he's giving a speech, and it's, you know, PR, you know, to make him look good to the public, right? But then you also see the real Palpatine just hanging out in the Imperial Palace, you know, like terrorizing everybody underneath him, and then going deep down into the bottom of the Jedi Temple, well, now the Imperial Palace, to the Sith Temple that was, originally there before the Jedi decided to build their Jedi Temple on top of a Sith Temple, which is why their judgment was clouded in the prequels. All I'm saying is, like, just give us some Palpatine in Andor. That's all I wanted. It was a little bit of Palpatine. We didn't need Tarkin. I know that, you know, we get that Uncanny Valley stuff in Rogue One, and I'm okay with it for the most part. It's better than the Uncanny Valley Leia at the end. I get that we weren't going to see Vader, despite, you know, us being kind of teased with that, with Deidre's choking in the trailer. But sadly, no Palpatine time in Season 2 of Andor. But it doesn't take away the fact that I thoroughly enjoyed watching both Season 1 and Season 2 of Andor. They go together very well, and they definitely paved the way for Rogue One, as well as the Star Wars original trilogy. It's unfortunate that we're probably not going to see a Disney Plus Star Wars series of this quality ever again. I hope I'm wrong about that. But unfortunately, this show wasn't for everybody. And there's a lot of Star Wars fans out there that don't like Andor for some reason. I guess they just don't appreciate the finer things in life. And they probably don't like Better Call Saul or Breaking Bad either. But what can you do? At least we got Season 1 and 2 of Andor to go along with Rogue One. Almost everything else regarding Disney Plus Star Wars, I could just push off to the side. I was thinking about doing a Tales of the Underground review, but I didn't really care for it. I did reviews about like Tales of the Jedi, Tales of the Empire a while back. And once again, reviews of all the movies in the saga, from the prequels to the original trilogy, as well as the sequel trilogy, and some other Star Wars content in my Star Wars playlist, in case you're curious. Your thoughts, views, and opinions regarding Andor Season 2, welcome, as always, below in the comments section.